for more. We're joined once again by aviation expert Jock Williams. And Jock, just in the past hour, we have these new reports. There's nothing confirmed yet, and I want to make that clear. But ISIS has, a group affiliated with ISIS, has put out a statement claiming responsibility for the accident. Again, we don't have confirmation that in fact ISIS is responsible. But what do you make of that, given just from your aviation expertise about what seems to have happened to this airplane?
Well, maybe I could add a little bit of the military expertise also. That's exactly what terrorists do. Whether they did the deed or not, claiming credit for it gives them credit in the eyes of the general public around the world. We think that'd be bad credit, but remember that a lot of people hate us, and people who do bad things to us are lauded for doing so. As to whether they did it or not, I have no idea, but they could do it. And one way that I haven't heard mentioned is that although we're talking about these things as if it would be impossible to shoot down an airplane at 30,000 feet, it would be with a shoulder-fired weapon. But a few miles away in Yemen, as an example, could be Russian 2.5-ton trucks with the truck-fired models of these things, and there are such things. So we have to watch that we don't fixate on what's been done before. We do know that people are capable of firing the bigger missiles because they did it in the Ukraine. We don't know who, but we know that somebody did. Well, there's more of those things adrift around the world than you would like to think about. And so the possibility is that they shot it down. But the other possibility is that something was put on board the aircraft that went boom in the air and caused this 5-kilometer wreckage field.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because there are reports that the debris field spread over an area of 5 kilometers. So that's an important point that is being made in terms of, you believe that means that this thing didn't just crash into the ground, it broke apart in the air.
I've been at crash sites. I was at the DC-8 crash site up in, I'm trying to think of the name, King City area, back in 1968. A DC-8 crashed. And it was a contained area. That airplane was in an area maybe the size of 3 football fields. The whole thing, the whole wreckage field. And that's because it went in vertically. But if you go in anything approaching a controlled attitude, you are not going to spread wreckage for 5 kilometers. You might, at the outside, you might spread it over 1 kilometer. 5 kilometers tells me it came apart in the air while traveling at high speed. Perhaps people began to fall out of the hole in the side of the fuselage or whatever. Now remember, this is all hearsay. We don't know whether it really is a 5-kilometer field. But if it is, that plane came apart in the air. You can be positive of it.
So what do we know in terms of what the pilot said just before this happened?
Well, somebody, not John Williams, but somebody knows that the pilot said something. He said he had some form of a technical flaw. For myself, I would say I've had an engine failure. I would say I have an electrical failure, or partial electrical failure. He apparently didn't say that. Now, whether he's just being cool and not declaring an emergency, which is ill-advised under some circumstances, or whether he really doesn't know what he's had. Maybe he heard an odd noise, or maybe the plane begins to feel badly. A plane would feel badly if it had a big hole blown in the side and it's a little bit bent now. So the pilot would sense that it just doesn't seem right, although in this airplane it's a side stick he's holding onto. But he says that it's not responding the way I'm used to, but we're still flying. Plane hasn't quit flying, the engines haven't stopped, you know, and we appear to be in control. So maybe he was just reluctant to speculate himself. He's just busy flying.
He just didn't know.
He's busy and he doesn't know.
Possibly.
That's right.
All right, so now one of the latest reports also says that the Russians are examining fuel samples from the last refueling stop. What will they be looking for?
Well, they'd be looking for contamination of the fuel system, but as I said earlier, jet engines will burn anything that will burn. Vodka is a possibility. Perfume, it would burn a typically strong ladies' perfume, it would burn that. It will certainly burn diesel fuel, normal car gas, almost any kind of fuel that you can want. The only problem is if it's got a huge amount of water in it, because then the engine can't burn water until the engines go out. But remember, he didn't say it was an engine failure. So I think that that's probably a bit of a red herring. But you've got to, they always check the fuel truck that a plane that crashed was using. And we will continue doing that because it's always a possibility, but I think it's rather unlikely.
Now, the state television in Egypt is reporting that the black box has been seized by Egypt's prosecutor general. Is that usual or unusual?
Well, we in Canada, we have the Transportation Safety Board that is forced, or not forced, it was created in order to investigate accidents. So we don't involve police forces or the Attorney General's department or whatever. But things are different. We know that Egypt, while a democracy, is far different from ours. So maybe that's the way they would go about investigating an accident in Egypt. As long as it's an honest investigation, who cares whether it's the police or the Transportation Safety Board or what?
Do you have concerns, though, that there could that you want to contain the scene, you don't want it to be tainted, you don't want anyone to fuss around with this black box?
Yeah, no, that's true, and I don't think that these people would open it up. They'll send it to the appropriate people to read the contents of the black box, but maybe they're trying to stop somebody else from messing with the black box. You know, the trick is the chain of custody has to be intact. If we think that somebody had that black box for 2 weeks before we got a look at it, it could be tampered with, although it would be pretty easy to tell whether it had been tampered with. So I'm not nervous about the Egyptian government. They're a de facto government of an existing democratic country. But you want to watch what they do next. Do they send that black box to Paris to be read, or to Washington, or to Farnborough in England to be read, or do they mess around with it themselves? I'd be really worried if that happened.
Yeah. Now, you know, apparently the Egyptians are saying that Russian safety aviation experts are going to be allowed on the scene.
Yes.
Is that's normal?
That's quite normal. The country of origin of the airplane, in other words, it was a Russian airliner, that's the country of origin, also the country of destination. So they have rights in two ways. Okay, the Egyptians obviously, and the manufacturers of the aircraft, Airbus Industries, which is a multinational, but call it French. So they will all be invited to take part and have serious inputs to this investigation.
How important is, speaking of that black box, how important is the black box in terms of getting the answers as to what happened to this airplane?
If they have the digital flight data recorder within, let's say within a day, they will know exactly what happened to the aircraft, because they will have readouts in a whole bunch of different areas. They'll have engine readouts, electronic readouts, control input readouts, autopilot readouts, and all of these things with incredible accuracy. They can also plug it into a machine that projects all the instruments on a screen, moves the controls around. It is just incredible how valuable that is. There will be no mystery if they have an intact digital flight data recorder. And couple that with the cockpit voice recorder, and they'll have a real-time play-by-play as it goes on.
All right, what about the scene? How important is that in terms of piecing together what happened?
The scene is dreadfully important if you didn't have the rest of the stuff. You'll take an air photograph of the scene. You will actually use a GPS and map every single fragment. You should see the investigation that goes on. But we do that in order to find out what the chain of events was that led to the initial impact or led to the coming apart in the air. But when we have a digital flight data recorder, there's not much mystery. So we're just confirming, oh yes, it was going about 400 miles an hour. Therefore, it flew 5 kilometers instead of 1.5. It was at such and such a height. Therefore, the wreckage field is spread that much further. We already have all the evidence we need if we have those two recorders, but we can back it up and prove that it's accurate by looking at the wreckage.
And final quick question to you. What are you watching for next? What's the most important thing you want to know right now?
I would like to hear what exactly the tower was told. We say that the pilot said he had a technical problem, but is that their summary, or is that what he said? You know, knowing that will make a big difference, and then getting into those two recorders will make all the difference in the world.
All right. Jock, thank you very much. That was aviation expert Jock Williams.